The Zuni people of New Mexico tell a creation story tied to their rugged land. Long ago, humans lived in a dark underworld, the first of 4 worlds, and they were guided by twin war gods, sons of the Sun Father and their mother, Awana Wailona the Creator. Life was good until folks got rowdy, fighting, stealing, and others. The gods warned them, but chaos reigned, so the twin gods unleashed a flood, water rising to drown the wicked. The people fled upward through a reed, emerging into the second world, a watery mess with just a few survivors. Here, they met strange beings like the coyote who tried to help them but often messed up, and the gods guided them again, teaching them farming and respect. Over time, they climbed through more worlds, with each flood refining them, until they reached the 4th world, our dry, sacred Zuni land. This myth from the Zuni of the American Southwest blends their oral tradition with a cycle of renewal and not just destruction. Floods here aren't punished, but a reset, reflecting their arid environment where water is life. The Zuni still perform the Shalako ceremony, which is a dance that honors this emergence with Kachina spirits guiding the renewal. It feels like every culture has a story about some god hitting the reset button because they were just annoyed. The world is wicked or noisy or corrupt or even selfish, and the gods needed or wanted an excuse to wipe the slate clean. And there's also a real component to the flood myth. But let's get into the myths first, at least a few of them. And I've already talked about one of them. What makes these myths so universal? Well, let's start off with the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the story begins not with a moral failing, but a simple, relatable grievance among the great gods, led by the Supreme Council. Humanity had multiplied across the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and their existence had become a deafening clamor. The god Enlil, the god of wind, earth, and storms, and often the most volatile of the pantheon, was furious. He couldn't sleep. The noise of mankind was described as the uproar of mankind had become too great, and I am disturbed by their clamor. This wasn't a judgment on sin, it was a cosmic desire for silence. The solution decreed by the assembled gods was total annihilation through a massive flood. Fortunately for mankind, not all the gods agreed with Enlil's brutal plan. The wise and benevolent god Ea, the god of water and wisdom, also known as Enki, could not directly defy the council's decree by speaking to a mortal. Instead, Enki found a loophole. He came to the house of Utnapishtim, a pious and righteous man in the city of Shurapak. He didn't speak to him. He spoke to the reed hut where Utnapishtim slept. Reed hut, wall, wall. O man of Shurapak, tear down your house, build a boat, abandon possessions, and save life. Swallow your goods, save your soul alive, make all living creatures go up into the boat. Utnapishtim immediately understood the divine message, and he tore down his home with the help of his community and began building an enormous multi-decked vessel. Unlike Noah's simple rectangular ark, Utnapishtim's boat was described as a perfect cube, a massive 7-storied ziggurat in some translations, built to precise geometrically complex measurements. And he loaded the boat with all of his possessions, as well as silver and gold, his family, kinsfolk, and craftspeople, and the seed of all living creatures. When the moment arrived, the sky darkened and the storm gods raged. The flood came with such ferocity that even the great gods were terrified and retreated to the highest heavens, weeping, quote-unquote, like women. The water covered the earth for 6 days and 6 nights, and on the 7th day, the tempest subsided, and Utnapishtim opened a hatch to see only water. His boat landed on the summit of Mount Nasir. After waiting 7 more days, Utnapishtim released a dove, a swallow, and then a raven, which did not return, signaling that the waters had receded. Utnapishtim then made a sacrifice to the gods on the mountaintop. The gods, who were now starving, because humanity was no longer around to feed them, clustered like flies among the smoke of the offering, and Enlil, upon seeing that a human had survived, was enraged. However, the other gods, led by Enki, calmed him, reminding him that the purpose of the flood was simply too extreme, and as a compromise, Enlil granted Utnapishtim and his wife the unique gift of immortality and settled them far off at the mouth of the rivers to live like gods. The most popular one for us is Noah's Ark. In the biblical narrative, God observed the state of the world he had created and was deeply disappointed. The earth had become utterly corrupt and filled with violence. often translated as Hamas. Unlike the Sumerian gods who were simply irritated, the Judeo-Christian God was heartbroken and angered by humanity's moral decay. The text states, "The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This leads to the divine decision to send a flood. I will blot out from the face of the earth the human beings I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them." Amidst the universal corruption, one man found favor in God's eye, Noah. And Noah is specifically singled out because he was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. God gives Noah precise instructions to build a massive vessel, the ark, out of gopher wood, waterproofed with pitch and divided into 3 decks with many rooms. Noah was instructed to bring aboard his family, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, 2 of every kind of animal, every creeping thing, bird, and beast, and 7 pairs of every clean animal and bird suitable for sacrifice. And the flood begins when Noah is 600 years old, and the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights, and all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. The waters covered the highest mountains, destroying every living thing on earth outside of the ark. The ark floated for 150 days until the waters began to recede, and it came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah famously sends out a raven and then a dove, which returns, first with nothing and then with an olive leaf, a signal that life was returning. After leaving the ark, Noah's first act is to build an altar and offer sacrifices to God, and in response, God establishes a covenant with Noah in all future generations. He promises never again to destroy all life on earth with a flood. And the rainbow that is designated as the visual sign of this eternal covenant. And then we have the story of Manu and the fish avatar. And this story centers on Manu, the first man who is highly revered for his righteousness and devotion. And one day, while Manu is performing his daily ritualistic ablutions, washing, in a river, a tiny little fish swims into his hands. The fish, addressing Manu in a human voice, pleads for protection, fearing being swallowed by a larger fish, and pitying the creature, Manu takes it home and places it in a small bowl. The fish immediately begins to grow at a miraculous rate, and it quickly outgrows the small bowl, and Manu moves it to a larger earthen jar. And when it outgrows the jar, Manu moves it to a tank, then it outgrows a tank, and Manu dutifully moves it to the Ganges River. Finally, when the fish becomes too large for the great river, Manu transports it to the ocean. And at this point, the enormous fish reveals its true identity. It's Matsya, the first avatar of the great preserver god Vishnu. Matsya informs Manu that a great destructive flood, pralaya or cosmic dissolution, is imminent, signifying the end of the current age. This flood is not a spontaneous punishment. It's a scheduled, unavoidable part of the universe's recurring cycle of creation and destruction. So Matsya instructs Manu to build a sturdy ship, the Hindu ark, gather the 7 great sages, collect the seed of all plants and the seed of all living creatures necessary to restart the world, and then the great downpour begins and the ocean starts to rise, engulfing the world. Manu boards the waiting ship with the sages, the plants, and the animals. And true to his promise, the giant fish Matsya reappears in the swirling waters. Using a massive serpent, the Naga, as a rope, Manu ties his ship to the great horn on Matsyu's head, and Matsya then safely guides the ship through the raging, chaotic deluge until the waters finally subside. And when the flood is over, Manu is the sole human survivor and the designated progenitor of the new era. He performs severe penances and sacrifices, and from him all subsequent life is born, which resets the human race. And then you have the Greek myth. Now, this occurs during the Age of Bronze, a period where humanity had grown deeply wicked, violent, and insolent toward the gods, and Zeus was horrified by the moral depravity, specifically after being served human flesh during a feast by the impious king Lycaon, which was an act that cemented Zeus's decision to destroy the entire race. Unlike the subtle annoyance of the Mesopotamian gods, this was an act of pure punishment and a furious divine response to impiety, lack of respect for the divine order. Zeus decided to send a massive flood to cleanse the earth, but one couple was spared because of their righteousness and piety: Deucalion, the son of Prometheus, and Pyrrha, his wife, the daughter of Pandora and Epimetheus. Deucalion's father, Prometheus, foresaw the impending flood. He instructed his son to build a simple wooden chest or ark, Deucalion and Pyrrha quickly gathered their necessities and entered the chest, the ark, as Zeus unleashed the deluge, shutting the floodgates of heaven. Rain lashed down continuously and the sea swelled, covering everything. Every mortal on earth perished. After 9 days and 9 nights of floating, the chest came to a rest on the peak of Mount Parnassus, and when the waters receded, Deucalion and Pyrrha stepped out onto the mountains, realizing that they were the only mortals left alive. Overwhelmed by loneliness, they prayed to the goddess Themis for guidance on how to restore the human race, and the oracle gave them a cryptic command: veil your heads, loosen your robes, and throw the bones of your mighty mother behind you. Pyrrha was initially horrified, thinking the oracle meant the bones of her actual mother, but Deucalion correctly interpreted the prophecy. The mighty mother is the earth, and her bones are the stones within the earth. The couple then veiled themselves, picked up stones, and tossed them behind their backs. The stones thrown by Deucalion were transformed into men. The stones thrown by Pyrrha were transformed into women. In this way, Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulated the earth with a new, stronger, and less impious race, fulfilling the cosmic cleanup and restart. So we've journeyed through ancient Mesopotamia, the biblical lands, the high Himalayas, Mount Parnassus. Specific names and motives change from Enlil's annoyance to Zeus's fury, but the overall story structure remains eerily consistent. These global myths aren't just disaster accounts. They reveal 4 essential enduring truths about humanity's relationship with the divine. The first is the principle of cosmic purification. Whether the blight was the chaos of human noise in Sumer, the sin of Hamas in Genesis, or the necessary cycle of decay in Hindu tradition, the flood was always the ultimate reset button. It wasn't just heavy rain. It was systematic, brutal cleansing of the world, and it was designed to scrub the earth of whatever the gods deemed impure or unbalanced. This enforced chaos highlights the second truth, the undeniable weight of divine authority. These stories serve as a powerful, visceral reminder that humans are not in control, and when a god or the divine decides the current age is over, the laws of nature are instantly suspended. The sheer scale of the deluge, the floodgates of heaven opening, or the seas rising, forces the realization that power resides beyond our grasp, demanding our reverence and obedience. The third is the principle of the chosen survivor. And while the destruction is total, the selection process is precise. These myths guarantee that the righteous, the wise, or the pious will always be spared. Utnapishtim's wisdom, Noah's piety, Manu's devotion, and Deucalion's adherence to divine law all secured them passage. The message is unwavering. Survival is earned by aligning your life with the divine moral standard. And finally, and most powerfully, these myths are not about an end, it's just a new beginning. The flood is the darkest point, but it's always given way to new hope. The rainbow covenant, the fresh creation from stones, or the duty to restart civilization, these are eternal parables that promise that no matter how chaotic or corrupt humanity becomes, there is always the possibility of a clean slate or a chance to rebuild the world better than before. The origin of the Great Flood myth, appearing across cultures like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Zuni emergence tale, and even hints in the biblical Noah story, likely stems from a combination of real environmental events and human imagination. Rather than a single great and terrible accident, we're going to break it down based on archaeological, geological, and anthropological evidence. So according to speculation beyond what's supported by current data as of today, the leading theory and the most widely accepted origin ties flood myths to the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 to 7,000 BC, when massive glacial melting caused significant sea level rises and regional flooding. The evidence is the Black Sea deluge hypothesis. Around 5600 BC, the melting ice caps likely breached the Bosporus Strait, flooding the freshwater Black Sea basin. Studies by geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman suggest this turned a landlocked lake into a saltwater sea, displacing communities and inspiring tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sediment cores show a rapid influx of salt water supporting a catastrophic flood. Rising seas submerged coastal settlements, including parts of the Persian Gulf, dated around 14,000 to 7,000 BC, where early Sumerian cultures thrived. This could have seeded the Utnapishtim flood narrative, with its detailed boat building and divine warning reflecting a memory of inundation. For the global impact, sea levels rose about 400 feet over millennia, flooding river valleys worldwide, and this aligns with the indigenous American and oceanic myth, where floods reset worlds, possibly echoing local river overflows and coastal retreats. Archaeological sites like submerged Neolithic villages off India's coasts and England's Doggerland show human displacement, which oral tradition might have exaggerated into divine floods. The consistency, boats, survivors, divine intent, suggests a shared human experience of these events that were passed down and adapted. The idea of a singular accident, a meteor impact or volcanic eruption, causing a massive flood lacks strong evidence as a sole origin. However, some theories propose contributing events. Around 12,800 BC, a comet fragment may have struck Earth, causing wildfires, cooling, and flooding from melted ice. Proponents link this to the North American Clovis culture decline and global flood myths, but evidence is debated. Impact craters are unconfirmed, and flooding was gradual, not instantaneous. There was also the Santorini eruption, and this volcanic explosion in the Aegean Sea caused tsunamis, potentially inspiring Minoan flood tales, a rare pre-Greek angle, but it's too late and localized to explain widespread myths like Gilgamesh or the Zuni. River floods like the Tigris, Euphrates, or the Nile, or lake bursts like Lake Agassiz, draining into the Arctic around 8400 BC, could have been magnified into great floods by oral exaggeration, especially in fertile crescent cultures prone to seasonal inundation. These accidents likely amplified existing flood memories rather than originating them. No single event matches the global scope of all flood myths, suggesting a cumulative cultural memory. Flood myths likely began as oral histories of these post-Ice Age floods, shaped by each culture's worldview. Polytheistic gods reflect a chaotic natural order, with floods as divine tantrums recorded on tablets by 2100 BC. The Zuni culture had a renewal cycle which fits their arid environment where water is sacred, evolving from oral traditions pre-contact, documented from the 19th century. Trade, migration, and conquest, from the Sumerians to Babylonians and indigenous tribes across Americas, spread and adapted the core story, adding local flavors, the boats, the animals, and the gods. The origin most likely traces to post-Ice Age flooding, especially the Black Sea deluge and Persian Gulf inundations, with archaeological support from submerged sites. A great accident, like a comet or volcano, may have contributed locally, but isn't the primary source. Human memory, amplified by storytelling, turned real floods into mythic epics, and explains why the motif spans continents. Like it if you like it. Like, subscribe, comment. Have a good day.